Welcome back to VSL. I'm Kevin Crowan here with Matt Sperling. Matt, that was a heck of a match that you and I just had. I figure we should talk about it maybe a little bit, but I'm also interested in your thoughts on deck selection as well. So, where to begin? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, well, coming out of that interesting match, I think both topics are really super relevant. We saw some of the choices we made were front and center, and then yeah, some interesting games. I guess we can start with the deck building. We both went with a blue, white, red, Xerox if you prefer. If you want, I like differentiating between the different decks that might play preordained. So I'm not super thrilled about this deck name or that deck name, but certainly a lot of cards in common. We both landed on three Lavinia and a bunch of blue, white, red cards to support her.
Absolutely. Notable inclusions on your side include balance, which was obviously pivotal in our third game there. And on my side, Caracas. Now, I'm guessing you considered Caracas at least. So how come you didn't end up running any copies in your 75 of Caracas?
Yeah, the lands were tough for me. I considered Mountain, I considered Wasteland, I considered Library of Alexandria, and I didn't end up playing any of those cards. I think Caracas is really good right now. I had commented that I don't think you can play PO these days without it, or I don't think you want to play PO without it. It's just so good at getting rid of these problematic cards. Look at Seth's deck if you want to understand what some of those problematic cards are, right? Between
Hmm.
Lavinia, Thalia, the other Thalia, and Kumbal. There's plenty of targets. So yeah, Caracas. Yeah, it was close. I just decided I wanted the planes, and then there's a limit to how much that stuff you can do if you want to be casting your preordains and stuff. So I just decided to trim it, but it's close.
Hmm. And how did you feel about the presence of Caracas in my deck going into sideboarding? Did you bring in Pithing Needle?
No, you know, I didn't bring it in. A problem. I had a weak card in my deck in Mystical Tutor that I could have made it into a needle. I could have made it into a fragmentize if I thought I could use it to blow up one of your moxes, or if you want a needle chase or something. So none of those cards are great, but Needle is just so bad in the even in the 70th percentile of games you draw
Mm.
it's just pretty bad that I can't really optimize on trying to stop Krakus. And ultimately, if they beat Lavinia, it's just one card in your deck. Lavinia, it's not like I've got a bunch of legends that are. Jace too, but once you flip the Jace, so I don't know. Yeah, I could have brought it in maybe, but I decided not to. And then that's
Uh,
kind of why I wanted a Wasteland at some point. um, Wasteland just does a lot. There's cards like Cavern. There are cards like you have a Lavinia out and you just want to keep them from being able keep their land count down. So I really wanted Wasteland, and I don't know. I probably should have played some more of that stuff, but I didn't.
yeah, understood completely, and I completely agree on how poor Pithing Needle is in the average game. I mean, you don't want to plan for failure, and given that you're not a tutor deck, you're not a demonic tutor deck, so you can't really search it out actively. I completely understand your perspective. And also, you can just overpower, right? You have cards that can power through in Mentor and DAC, and if it comes to it. And that game where I had Caracas online, you were very, very close to powering through it in exactly that way. Between the combination of Mentor and DAC, it was nip and tuck right there until the end in game three.
Yeah, and sequencing your cards in these decks is really really difficult. And I thought I made a couple inefficient plays that really punished me. When I
Mm.
paid a blue mana for probe without knowing the top card of my deck, which is usually a bad idea, and I just didn't really think too hard about it. And then I saw that you had Spell Queller, and then I ended up with 3 mana, one of them tapped because I paid the blue, and I had Time Walk Swords, and you had Spell Queller, and that's obviously a tragedy. So you know, it's vintage. The little things matter.
Hmm.
1 mana here, one card there. It's just we're not playing standard. It's not like, oh, you had an extra 2/1 because of that. It's no, these are big swings.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the matchup we're about to see. So Andy Markiton is on Pitch Dredge versus Saffron Olive's Esper Humans. What do you think about this matchup? Where does your call lie?
Well, I like these decks for different reasons. I like the way Dredge is positioned to kind of punish those of us who thought, oh well, we'll show up with, we'll prepare to beat other blue decks and we'll prepare to beat PO, and then here comes Pitch Dredge, and I think it's really well positioned. It might be a favorite to 3-0 against these three decks.
Hmm.
So really well positioned deck there. And on the other side of the table with SaffronOlive, his deck, I just really like that he's playing something you don't see every day in Vintage, and I think the card choices are smart. It's cards you don't play against all the time, but they all make sense when you look at them. I mean, they're not. It's not just human. So many humans. It's the specific cards that are in there. You play against Freebooter and Dark Confidant, and they can just rip a control deck apart. Now against Dredge, are those tools obviously against Dredge? You're no longer playing Magic in the same sense. You're playing some different sub game, and he's got the sideboard cards to try to do that.
Hmm.
Jailers, Containment Priest, Cage. So this matchup, this may not really get underway until game 2, but things are really going to be interesting.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and our players are ready. So let's go down to the table. All right, here we have it. And opening 7 for Andy features exactly what he wants, which is Bazaar of Baghdad, times 2, in fact, plus a hollow one. A very strong aggressive start. Mental misstep, not really well positioned in this in this matchup. There's only a single target in Seth's deck, which is Ancestral Recall. Now here's
Yeah.
Seth. What do you think about Seth's keep? Do you think Seth can even afford to keep a hand that doesn't have a Mox in this matchup?
So first of all, a comment on this game 1 is just not going to be interesting because these game 1s tend not to be interesting. That's
Hmm.
fine. Like we said, this matchup might get started in game 2, but it's interesting how good the Seth's deck, how much better it is with a Mox. I think against every opponent, it's just
Hmm.
so much better with a Mox. And here you see, again, I mean, it's probably not super relevant because there aren't many starts that really do so much for Seth. He has a Wasteland, so I understand the keep. Maybe
Hmm.
between Time Walk, I draw a blue source, I can Time Walk, and then my next turn, Wasteland, play a bear. I mean, there's a logic to the keep, but he's playing at small percentages anyway. Um, the other reason to keep is that you have proactive tools, and a lot of your game 1 win rate is actually your opponent's deck completely failing and mulliganing to 2, or only
Hmm.
managing to muster like Bazaar, no Dredger, and then I can Wasteland. So the keep makes some sense to me.
It's also worth noting that Seth was on the play, and so keeping this 7, he didn't have any kind of luxury of knowing how Matt or Andy was mulliganing. And the fact that Andy kept a 7 against this, makes if Seth could have it back, he'd probably go down against a 7 keep from Andy.
I I think that's right,
Yeah.
but then again, I mean, Wasteland is the list of cards that interact in a meaningful way is not long, and Wasteland's on that list. So I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not sure if I knew my opponent was going to keep on the draw. Do I keep? I don't know. I think it's close. And either way, we're talking about you're going to change your 8% to a 9% or something. I mean, again,
Yeah.
these game 1s are rough against a Kept 7.
And it's a complete lost cause here against double Bazaar, double Hollow One. I mean, I don't know if you could craft a hand of 7 for Seth that actually wins this particular game.
Yeah, certainly in game 2 you can. In game 1, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'd be
Although
hard pressed.
I would say that Lotus Thalia 2.0 is good against Dredge. If you have
Sure,
Lotus and Thalia on 3 and then followed up with a Wasteland on Bazaar, that's a game winning line potentially in game 1, but
you're right.
not to be.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah. So there's not when you mulligan to 6. I mean, there's not that many ways to put together specifically Lotus and one of the three ofs, but it's a reason to mulligan. The strength of that. You can't you got to try to win, obviously, even though that game 1's really rough. So game 1
Mhm.
is, as we suspected, over, and as we talked about, here's Seth reaching for really at least 10 cards or something like
Mhm.
that, and they're really impactful cards.
And boarding out just everything he can at the top of his curve. Comball comes out, Palace Jailer comes out, Revokers come out, Reflector Mage. Everything at the top of his curve that costs 3 or more except that Thalia. I'm really interested to see. It's not much of a surprise, I would say, on Seth's side, but I'm really interested to see how much Andy respects Seth's two Grafdigger's cages because that's really tricky on the draw for Andy. Does he bring in a number of sideboard cards to fight a two of, or does he
Yeah.
just count on his Force of Will / Mental Misstep to handle it?
Yeah, it's a great point. You don't get to play Nature's Claim for free. There's
Right.
a cost. You're diluting your deck, and you're going to make it harder to Spinning Darkness. You're going to make it harder to Force the Will. Or, all these different things you're trying to do. They get harder when you add lands, and so I don't know. I don't mind. I don't mind roll the dice. He's two cage, whereas there are 7 of the creature hate bears. So you're more likely to face an opponent who kept their hand and has a hate bear than you are to face cage. So I don't mind rolling the dice.
Well, Andy agrees with you. He did not bring any of his extra mana sources or cage removal in, counting on Misstep and Force. So Seth's hand here has Wasteland and no other decent interaction. I think you have to mulligan that in this matchup. Don't you agree?
So Ancestral Recall always makes, and a blue source is always going to make it interesting, but you don't. Yeah, here there's just not even a really enticing reason to keep it. If you let's say you do hit Mox, you're still at. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to mulligan here. I just don't think this 7 does anything except draw 3 cards in this particular matchup. And you could easily, with the number of cards he boarded in, you could easily mulligan into 2 hate cards. So I
Yes.
think for SaffronOlive, he's gotta just trust the 6 here.
Well, he kept it. He kept it because Andy has already gone down here, and
Okay.
Andy's got a 6-card hand with a Bazaar that looks very nice. Multiple dredgers, therapy for a bit of disruption.
So I mean, so the good news, so it's not the keep I would have made, but with Ancestral and a blue source, you can be a little bit wrong. You can't be that wrong because you're seeing 3 cards instead of 6, and you get to keep the Wasteland and the Lavinia. So I don't want to just because I would have played it differently doesn't mean this is horrible.
Yeah.
It's just gonna put him in a spot where he's got to hit with the Ancestral Recall.
Well,
I
here we see Andy's first dredge, and it's a ton of dredgers. Look at all the Grave Troll action. He's well set up for the next turn if he can dodge disruption. At this point, he has no way to interact with Seth,
Yeah,
which is
he really
unusual
drew
for
a
this
bunch.
pitch dredge.
Yeah, he drew one thing, which is just kind of proactive combo pieces. And interestingly, so Saffron Olive, he chose to sandbag the Ancestral. Thankfully for him, Andy did not draw a Mental Misstep,
Hmm.
and really didn't draw anything except redundant copies of what was already there. So the good news for Seth, that nothing that's reactive here that can stop a hate bear. The bad news is he doesn't have the hate bear yet. He's going to have to draw it. We've got Ancestral, so we'll see.
Yeah, 4 new cards for Seth before his next main phase. Let's see how well it pans out for him. Tundra into Ancestral reveals. Any hate card will do at this point. There you go. Containment Priest. Right on time.
Containment Priest with the Lavinia that he had also and the Wasteland. He's really going to force Andy to draw, let's say, a Spinning Darkness or something like that very quickly. There's not going to be a lot of time because Lavinia locks you out of Spinning Darkness relatively quickly. And Wasteland is going to take away your ability to draw extra cards. So this keep by SaffronOlive, it looked like it was a little bit risky, but he's really hit the upside here just by hitting 1 hate bear. So it shows you why, like I said, if it was a mistake, it wasn't a huge mistake.
Right. When do you time this priest?
Um,
Main phase?
so I think you're gonna once you realize I'm not gonna be able to like wait more than a turn, then you just want to play it as soon as possible. I think if you look at what's going on, that's interesting though because I guess now your opponent doesn't have to dredge; he can try to draw the Spinning Darkness. Um, so I guess it's interesting.
Given that
Yeah,
Andy's deck is a Force of Will deck, it's really iffy one way versus the other.
yeah. I mean, look, there's an argument for playing Lavinia first, so that you never get Force of Will and you never get Spinning Darkness,
Mhm.
and you never get Hollow One. But I'd be hard pressed. Your opponent get the turn with at least one Bazaar. Yeah, it's interesting.
So aside from spinning darkness, what Andy really wanted here to put pressure on, I think, is this hollow one. Unfortunately for him, oh, there's a force of will too. Seth's hand is just crammed with creatures that are going to become bigger and better than this hollow one, even multiple hollow ones, without too much difficulty, thanks to Thalia's lieutenant.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it looks nice, but it's just never enough. You're gonna get locked out by the hate, and you're gonna find yourself unable to cast anything else, and it's just not gonna win the game.
So Andy has exactly force of will going here. Unfortunately for Seth, he drew a second Bazaar, which means this wasteland is of limited utility. You expect Lavinia to get force of willed here, yes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's now or never for Force of Will if you're facing
Yep.
Lavinia. So definitely. And then yeah, look, I think with what at least three draw steps now to get a spinning darkness, and then just kind of being in a really crushing position. So things not
Well,
looking too bad.
he doesn't actually have 3 draw steps, though, because he's starting with no cards in hand. A Bazaar activation doesn't get him any more cards in this case.
Oh right, because you had to force down 0 cards. That's right.
Yep.
And yep.
So it's really up to this top deck right here for Andy. I think this is the whole game right here, spinning darkness or no.
Yep.
Yeah, he might be able to get some damage in on Seth for a few turns. Oh, unbelievable.
Oh
Well,
man,
right
that
on time, right
you know,
on time.
I wanted to see a game three, and I want to see this humans deck win, and so it's just backbreak. I know in the commentary booth, we're not supposed to have that kind of rooting interest, but against Dredge, I can't help myself, and that was just amazing. I mean, we talked about it. There's really only one draw step this turn that leaves you with a card in hand, and then
Uh,
Lavinia is about to come out.
so hitting the Force of Will plus blue card off of the Bazaar activation last turn, and then hitting the Spinning Darkness just now. He needed all of those pieces to come together in order to still be playing this game, and here we have it.
Wow. Now, is there with two Bazaars? He's going to get a lot of dredges. Is there a possibility that the dredges are poor enough that another hate bear that's drawn could even things back up?
I believe the short answer is yes. Now there's a bridge and a therapy, so
Mm.
the only way this doesn't work for Andy is if he completely whiffs on Narcomoebas right here, which is absolutely possible. Now, if you're Seth, I'm pretty sure you were supposed to. Oh, the Containment Priest dying got rid of the bridge. I think you're supposed to Wasteland in response to that Spinning Darkness, so that Andy only gets a single Bazaar activation.
Or he won't get the Narcomoebas. Yeah, he can still activate the Bizarre the Wasteland, but he won't get the he'll have to decline the Narcomoeba triggers, which
Precisely.
yeah
It
could
would
end
have,
up mattering.
yeah. In this case, it would have resulted in one fewer Narcomoeba. Well, that's it. Seth's seen enough. He knows that he can't really come back from that board position without a hate card.
All right.
And there you
Well,
have it.
vintage will sometimes give you that long blue mirror with a lot of back and forth, and sometimes it'll give you 2-0 dredge. And that's just you got to tip your cap to the deck selection and that key top deck. That's a pretty deadly combination when you win in the deck selection portion and you really have a favored in every matchup, and then you show up and you draw the perfect card you need. That's going to be tough to beat.
Absolutely. And so for our next match, we'll see if Andy can continue his run against me. So just keep tuned.
Best of luck. I'll be rooting for you.
Thank you.